Good evening. I'm Jennifer McCrory. I'm the Director-Curator here at the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to the opening receptions for 3 new exhibitions: Catherine Boyer, How the Sky Carries the Sun, Ross Melanson, Life Drawings, and Wuk-Shupi, the Historic Lakota Beadwork. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathering on Treaty 4 territory, the traditional lands of the Blackfoot, Nehiyawak, Anishinaabe, Lakota, Nakota, Dakota, Saulteaux, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. At the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery, we recognize that museums and galleries are part of a colonial system where collecting practices and colonialist narratives have been the foundations of these institutions. We're committed to decolonizing our institution by inviting and supporting Indigenous voices to lead and inform our programs, collections, and presentations of Indigenous art, history, and narratives, as well as making space for diverse voices in our community to co-curate and have their cultures and narratives reflected in our programs and exhibition content. I'd like to thank our funders, the City of Moose Jaw, Sask Arts, the Government of Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan Lotteries, Sask Culture, Canada Council for the Arts, the Government of Canada, and the Department of Canadian Heritage, as well as RBC Foundation. I also want to thank the New Southern Plains Métis Local 160 for their support of Catherine Boyer's exhibition. They've provided bannock tonight and for the reception, and for partnering with us this fall and providing some Métis history learning and Michif language learning opportunities to school and community groups. I'll begin by introducing the exhibition Life Drawings by local Moose Jaw artist Ross Melanson. The exhibition features a series of beautifully elegant and poignant drawings that serve as visual meditations for the artist. Reflective of his signature approach of working in a continuous line, he offers poetic compositions of isolated and overlapped biological forms as a means to processing and facing his cancer illness and its treatment, while becoming present in the moment to embrace life in all its wonder and constant change. Ross Melanson is a visual artist, arts writer, poet, and independent scholar. He holds a Master of Arts with an emphasis in historical theology. He's worked as a professor of theology, philosophy, and aesthetics, and in arts administration and management here at the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery. Working in painting, drawing, photography, installation, performance, and land-based art for over 30 years, his work has been exhibited provincially and nationally in both solo and group exhibitions. Unfortunately, Ross can't be with us tonight, but his family is here to represent him. They're here down in front. So thanks to Cora, Catherine, Elise, Braden, and Jeremy for being here. I would like to mention we will have an online talk with Ross at some point, so please stay tuned for that. The exhibition Wuk-Shupi, Historic Lakota Beadwork, is curated by Dr. Claire Thompson of Wood Mountain Lakota First Nation. The exhibition features beaded works in the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery collection and archival photographs, and it focuses on Lakota traditional beading and patterns, as well as Lakota history in Moose Jaw and Wood Mountain. This exhibition is part of a project that resulted from a Sask Culture Aboriginal Arts and Culture Leadership Grant, where our Indigenous Advisory Committee oversaw research on the Indigenous collection here. Claire Thompson and Lita Ferguson are both, are 2 members of Wood Mountain, are both on our Indigenous Advisory Committee, and it's been a great pleasure and experience working with them both and with Lori Dietz in researching the collection. They've provided oral stories for some of the Lakota objects in the collection. They've helped us connect objects to the original makers and owners, and have assisted us in properly identifying objects, as well as starting the process of identifying objects for repatriation. Next week, we're going to be hosting a walking tour with Claire Thompson on Thursday, September 28th, which will be at 7 o'clock. This event is being held as part of the Waccamaw Aboriginal Community Association's second annual Every Child Matters powwow and gathering. So I hope you can join us for that. This evening, I'm joined with artist Catherine Boyer for a dialogue about her practice and her work in the exhibition, How the Sky Carries the Sun. I'm going to be approaching this as an interview, but I invite you all to ask questions at any point, and or we can wait till the end as well. So I'll introduce Catherine. Catherine Boyer is a Métis white settler, a multidisciplinary artist whose work is focused on methods bound to textile arts and the handmade, primarily woodworking and beadwork. Her art and research encompasses personal family narratives entwined with Métis history, material culture, architectural spaces, both human-made and natural. Her work often explores boundaries between two opposing things as an effort to better understand both sides of perceived dichotomous identity. This manifests in long, slow, and considerate laborious processes that attempt to unravel and better understand history, environmental influences, and personal memories. In the past year, she's exhibited in significant exhibitions such as Storied Objects at the Ramey Modern, Radical Stitch at the Mackenzie Art Gallery, A Hard Birth at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, along with her solo exhibition, How the Sky Carries the Sun, which is toured to multiple locations as the Art Gallery of Regina and Platform Center, and now here, and is scheduled to exhibit in 2024 and 25. Most recently, she was longlisted for the Sobey Art Award and is a recipient of the Falconer Emerging Researcher Award. She currently holds a position as an assistant professor at the University of Manitoba School of Art. So, thanks for being with us here, Catherine. Yeah, So I thought a good place to start would be to talk about how you got your start in beading, and when did you start beading, and what influenced you to do so?
Okay, so this is going to come with a really funny story that happened just earlier today. After I graduated with my BFA at the University of Regina, I got a job at the First Nations University of Canada, where I met a very formative person in my life, Judy Anderson. And so at the First Nations University, they have a traditional arts entire area devoted to learning so many things. And Judy specifically was teaching a beading class there. And I sat in on one of the classes and picked up beading from there and have been beading ever since. And so earlier today, we had a school group come through, and I talked to them for about an hour about the show. And at the end, they asked me this same question. And I was trying to kind of remember the dates. And so I got that position in 2011. So I said, I've been beading since then. And they all gasped, because that's the year they were born. So you couldn't have not have like picked my jaw up off the floor. I was so shocked. So anyways, but yeah, I mean, I've been beading literally ever since. As soon as I picked it up, I haven't been able to put it down. I have been doing craft-based stuff for so long in my life, sewing my own clothes. My mom taught me how to sew. That the next step, by putting just beads onto a needle and thread, it just felt so good. It was also a really important way for me to connect to my Indigenous heritage that I hadn't previously had access to. So.
Great. So I wondered if you could also, or if you tell us about the title for the show and the significance of that relationship between the sky and the sun.
Yeah, so this is a COVID story. This whole show was developed during COVID, when we were all sort of stuck in one place. And I had up until then been working with land, trying to rekindle my connection to land-based learning. And when we were stuck in houses all of a sudden and didn't feel like we could leave necessarily, I started to kind of look to a different place to stay connected with nature, and that just happened to be the sky. So sitting in, my living room, looking out the window every day, the sky, it just kept on changing and morphing. And I realized really fast that I actually didn't know how to read the sky. Like I might know how to read land, like what grows next to what plants do good in what type of soil. That's how you might read the land for various reasons. And I realized that I couldn't name a cloud to save my life. And so then I started this kind of research into sky knowledge. I've kind of tried to start calling it, just trying to better understand what clouds mean for the future, and really thinking of it that way conceptually. And so this line of thinking led to wanting to develop a show about my identity. And what I was experiencing was this need to bring these kind of two halves of myself back together, this Métis side and this white settler side. And so I started to look to places, natural places that this analogy, this metaphor existed. And so I saw the sky in the sun, the sun in the sky as two very obviously different things, but we don't think of the sky without the sun. And so it seemed to me like a really important metaphor to bring these kind of two things together, this idea of sky knowledge that I was trying to develop for myself, and also this, this experience of trying to bring together my sides. Yeah.
So like skies figure prominently in the exhibition, and they're skies over specific places that are either have formed you, or you see they form your identity, or significant, meaningful to you. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah,
what those places are.
Absolutely, yeah. So they range. This is a good too fast. Sorry, never mind. So they range from the Sky Vest specifically. There is the sky above my house in Winnipeg. There's a sky above where my mom's ashes are spread, which is outside of Grenfell, Saskatchewan. There is on the back, that's the sky above the Souris Valley, now McDonald Lake, but at the time Souris Valley. And then there's a pocket above my dad's house in Regina, and then another pocket outside of, it's a park called Beaudry Park in Winnipeg. It was a place of solace during COVID as well. There's other, so there's one sky from above Moose Jaw, actually, over the spot where my dad was born, grew up, or partly grew up here. And so the reason I kind of talk about these skies as above places, because many of them were just pictures that I took while standing in these spots that are where you can, when you stand in a place that is just filled with a lot of history and a lot of maybe your family's history, and you just kind of feel this energy and this weight of that land. I was feeling that, but then where I was seeing my own perspective was realizing that skies move constantly. They are never stagnant. They are always changing. So what I was starting to realize for me personally, it felt like these skies above these places is what I see, is what I was experiencing in that specific place at that specific time. And so it's their importance is this kind of acknowledgement of past as well as exact present as you can be. And I think, well, we're all humans that have a hard time feeling present sometimes. And to me, that was my approach to really acknowledging my present experience in that space, my kind of orientation. So when I'm saying orientation, I'm saying it in a way that's about my positionality, about who I am as a person in that exact moment as well, everything I've been through up until that point. And so the Sky Vest is an accumulation of all of these places, all of these other times, and all of my present times in a pretty abstract way, I realize, but ultimately it's places that have made me who I am. That's really the beginning and end of it.
And in terms of like the Sky Vest and some of the other works, I love how, these places that are about your present day experience, but it's also about your past. So it's like you're time traveling in the work, and not just through time, but also across geographies as well. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the Sky Vest and how it kind of represents you in the exhibition.
Yeah, absolutely. It's another, I don't know, funny story, but I made it pretty much a year and a bit ago, and at the time it fit me perfectly. A year and a bit later, it's a little tight. So what it does though is it was meant to so be my body in the space that was an exhibition about myself and about my identity and experiences. It's very autobiographical. I was keen to have it positioned in a way that it kind of oversees things. It kind of does act as a little bit of myself in the space, kind of protecting things in a way. Is that?
Yeah. And I was thinking too, like with the some of the different skies put together, it kind of speaks to Métis movement, like the history of your family's movement. There's there's a few different pieces that you could talk about, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. So this piece right here specifically, it's called Meet Me Across the Medicine Line. It's about the story of my great-grandparents who their families both ended up in the North Dakota area and fell in love, had a family, but wanted to come back up to Canada. This was after 1885, and in the Souris Valley at the time, there was quite a few other family members had already set up a place to live, and so they were keen to just rejoin them. So they took on this incredible journey with like 5 kids. I don't quite remember how many kids were born at that point, but my great-grandpa left, and with the horses, and my great-grandma brought the kids. They went separately. It was like a month-long journey. And I've got this incredible book that great-grandma, her name is Mary LaRocque. She was 101 years old when she passed away. And so when she turned 100, my family put together this book of family stories. So it kind of, everybody gets a chapter, but it starts out with her story. And so this is where I have a lot of the stories that I have incorporated into that work specifically, the Meet You Across the Medicine Line work. But thinking of mobility more broadly, the Métis have always been a very mobile people by choice or by force. And I was trying to relate to that personally, having moved from my hometown in Regina to Winnipeg about 7 years ago, and feeling this kind of difficulty in rehoming and finding a new place to feel comfortable and to feel safe, obviously, and recognizing that same challenge must have been infinitely more difficult back in the day. And so you'll see, as part of this SkyVest installation, there are these blue fabric boxes where the Meet You Across the Medicine Line piece is sort of about their story of mobility. Those boxes are they're the shape of cardboard boxes. They're the way that I moved from place to place, from home to home. And so I wanted something that felt like the way I move, that we move now, but can still connect with that history of mobility. Yeah.
So yeah, you've talked about orientation, and I like sort of your play on orientation too in the exhibition. You're sort of using the sun and the sky to orientate yourself within a landscape or an environment, but you also make reference to the horizon. So I wonder if you could talk about the Queer Hometown Horizon piece.
Yeah, for sure. So that word orientation really came from Sarah Ahmed's writing about queer phenomenology. And it really resonated with me in how we, in our bodies, our specific bodies, kind of see the world and how the world sees us. And so that's sort of where that word came from. But of course, we orient ourselves to the night sky is a major one. But being that I'm in this still phase of daytime investigation. I haven't gotten into the night sky, but the horizon line conceptually is this place that is, again, always in motion, never set in stone. As you drive or walk forward, the horizon line always changes. And so it's never something stable. And I feel that maybe about my life and my identity. I'm not sure. It's this pretty existential issues I have. But what I poetically like about it is it's also the place where two things meet, where sky visually meets land. And again, it's another one of those kind of visual dichotomies of two things coming together, two identities being one. And so the Queer Hometown Horizon is the space above the house that I grew up in. So instead of imagining the horizon line, which we might imagine and we might draw, or we might use it as a straight line that adds perspective to imagery, this queer horizon line is a squiggle, and it follows, it hugs the tree line and the roof line of the neighborhood that I grew up in Regina. Oh, in fact, this very house. I like these surprises every time I catch it at the corner of my eye. So it hugs that house, and it hugs that house in a way that I was trying to acknowledge my young life, growing up in a space in an affluent middle-class neighborhood where presumed heteronormativity is pretty ever-present, and kind of dawning on memories that may have been innocent at the time, but now in hindsight, where my sexual and gender identity is a little bit more comfortable, I'm much more assured and confident, that looking back, really just seeing these things and memories and events that transpired as something different, something very queer indeed.
The materials that you're using in this work too, they're quite varied, and you see that throughout the exhibition. I've heard you've been described as an artist that engages with the narratives and histories embodied in materials. I love that idea.
Who says that?
that was in Material Girls.
Wow, Jennifer.
And so yeah, I wondered if you wanted to talk about why you use such a range of materials.
For sure, that's a very big answer. So for a lot of reasons, partly because of my queerness, I think. I did my undergrad in sculpture and felt this like calling to, try like non-traditional sculpture. I remember Sean Wally set us up with I think it was a dollar store project where we went to the dollar store and you can just search for the material you're going to use for your project. I remember that being so inspirational and taking that into the hardware store where my dad, so more context, my dad is a carpenter. He built all of the houses I've ever lived in except for currently in Winnipeg, but the houses I grew up in, he built them all by hand, often singularly by hand, apparently, with a little bit of help for drywall, I guess. So the use of like lumber and wood is partly this effort to kind of foster a better relationship with him or a good relationship with him, because I'm using materials that he's comfortable with, that he knows how to talk about, 2x4s, angles, trusses. Oh my. And so it was a way that we could have a shared interest in my art practice, which I don't feel he had sort of up until I was using more of these materials. And so that's one reason, but I also really like the feeling of having these different modes of working, like really hard, like hauling lumber, installing with a drill. That's one of my favorite ways to work. And I just feel like it unlocks this like butch side of me that I love so much. Yes. But then there's this other softer side that I love too, where it's crafty and it's very delicate beadwork. And that's just another inner split, I guess. I don't know. But so all of my material uses really try and kind of access these two ways that I participate in the world. Yeah.
And in a lot of your works, you pair materials that are kind of contrasting, or that I think you've kind of seen as binary in a way, but you create this like mutually supportive relationship. Can you talk about that and sort of like how that maybe connects to your idea of you've referred to your identity as being maybe dichotomous?
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. So, it really goes back to, some of what I said earlier, that I just love the idea of, two opposing things working really well together, because I don't think they have to be seen as opposing, or there's ways that they can work together. Maybe that's the better way to put it. So lumber that cradles, that's really, really works for me. Supporting, sorry, I've kind of lost my train of thought a little bit on that one.
Working with or pairing opposing materials.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's just important to kind of illustrate that oppositionality isn't bad. Yeah. It could be very positive and very good. Yeah.
Going back to when you said roof trusses, I thought, let's talk about, because I didn't realize that they were roof trusses in the SkyVest piece.
So that's a story about Batoche, actually. There was one year I was at the Back to Batoche festival, and if you've ever been to the kind of opening ceremonies, it's like, sometimes it feels like it's 3 hours long, and I know it's all important, and but it can just, your train of thought can just like run off in a million different places. And I remember I was sitting there in the sort of main stadium atrium area, and I looked up, and it kind of dawned on me the absorbency of wood. It's just in that space, but in all spaces, that stadium had been absorbing all of the sound, all of the history of all of those ceremonies, all of the words, all of the song, all of the jigging, all of the everything. And that these roof trusses had kind of, in my imagination, very tired, very kind of hot and sweaty, were just absorbing it all and hanging on to it. And this was happened just right before COVID, the last Back to Batoche, and then during COVID, they were still making houses. And I remember, well, of course they were making houses, but they were building them, and I was going for neighborhood walks, and I loved the moment in between where the roof wasn't quite on yet, but the roof trusses were up, and you could see the sky through all of the roof trusses. It was like this, like you were seeing the skeleton that no one would ever see again, and as soon as it's closed up, it's like closed up and gone. So it was this like really nice in-between moment of making and being made. And I wanted to really like capture that type of in-betweenness, because that's the other part of these dichotomies. There's this in-betweenness where it works, and the in-betweenness of the sky and the land, that's where it works. And so the roof trusses is this space that's kind of absorbs, or my imagination, it absorbs everything, and also brings in my dad's trade. The first time we installed this, he actively helped me put them together, although I cut them myself. Roof lines come in a few different other places too. I assume the light boxes have come up. So these light boxes also hold another type of truss, usually for apartment buildings, the sort of in-between levels. So it has that truss where it's more of a little zigzag, and it's got flat on either end. It also doubles as a quilt pattern, and then the roof line, on the grieving bag, which is one of the most recent works for the show.
Okay. Yeah, and if you haven't gotten up close to the grieving bag or even the sky vest, you'll smell the tanned hide still. It's really wonderful. You mentioned COVID, so I thought this was a good segue into the work that you made during COVID in the show, the cyan blue eclipse. Yeah, so that is the cyanotypes on fabric that kind of flutter in the wind in the galleries. So that was that was made during COVID. It was this effort to keep learning from the land. So it was kind of in between this place in time where I was learning about the sky, but I was still very interested in how plants help us. And what I was starting to move towards and still working on is a gardening practice as a bit of a research methodology. And I wanted to think about gardening as the place where I take care of my plants in an urban environment, and my plants then ultimately take care of me by feeding me or by helping in another way. And so there was a series of 5. We could only fit 4 in this show, although we've lost some lumber from one of the other ones, so I don't know. But we have 4 of that series of 5. And they document just a year of gardening, and what I learned through that. So
on the first panel is a tobacco plant, which I had never had the experience of growing before. Learned a lot from that. And it's really a sort of a mnemonic device in a way to kind of remind myself of what I learned about that experience. The next one in that line is the crows. That specific year, there was just so many crows, like a frightening a lot of crows. And so it felt document worthy. I had heard some other teachings about crows that I felt kind of resonated with the moment as well. The one after that is the sort of garden medley. It has a bunch of different vegetable plants, has zucchini, it has rhubarb, it has tomato plants, and then it has freaking squirrels that completely demolished all of them that year by digging in the ground, ruining the roots. And I still don't even know how to keep my vegetables safe from squirrels. I wish I had the footage on my phone on this screen to show everybody, but this year they're making this huge pile, and I mean huge pile of pine cones in my front yard. Like it looks curated. Like this very organized pile of pine cones. It is just unbelievable. Yeah. And then the last panel is a prairie rose bush, which I picked up from garden center and planted in my backyard as a perennial and just as a really important plant to my family and to the history of our visual story. My great grandma, that one Mary LaRocque that I was talking about, traveled from here to there to here. She was a really incredible rug hooker, and she had this one beautiful prairie rose that showed up, I think, twice in 2 of her rugs. And so I've really connected with that plant and that visual in my own beadwork. The collar around the sky vest is just another variation on the prairie rose that specifically also has the cycle of plants from fall to winter to spring to summer. So when you go back in there, you might be able to pick out, it's a repeating pattern, but it is just a cycle that's forevermore, hopefully.
Right. Yeah. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about the cyanotype process, because I loved how you said you felt like you were collaborating with the sun.
For sure. Yes. Yeah. That very important piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't had a chance to ever try cyanotype, it's just one of the funnest things ever. It's this photosensitive material that you can paint onto pretty much anything, almost anything. It likes to absorb, though, papers and fabrics. So these are all cotton, a very light cotton. And basically, you can place objects. A lot of grade schoolers will place like sticks and rocks and feathers, the keys, and expose it in the sun. And then when you remove it and you wash the emulsion away, everything that was underneath all those objects gets washed away. So you have this contrasting image, usually white and blue. So the important part, relating back to the title, I wanted all of these pieces to really connect with, the sky or the sun in some way, really thinking through these 2 modes. And so in the cyanotype, it was just so imperative to be aware of, like, how hot is it going to be today? The ideal time to do this is actually at, 9:53 in the morning, where the sun isn't too high in the sky. Or it can't be that windy out. So I had to really attune myself to the sun and to my environment in a way that, like another art practice, like my beading practice, I don't need to think about that as much. Although it's nice working in daylight. But aside from that, it was a different type of approach that meant I had to give in sometimes, where I couldn't work if it was raining, or I had to concede times. So that is how I described the sun as a collaborator in that way, where sometimes the sun would just not today, it's not happening today, we'll try back again tomorrow. So that's how, yeah.
Well, I wonder if we can open it up to the audience, if there's any questions. And I think we do have.
Thank you. I really appreciate how you talk about playing with binaries and like queering the things we know, and especially like all of the contrasts of like strong with delicate. Of what is like the work of the provider versus the work of the nurturer. And I'm two-spirit and queer, so one thing that I've wondered in like my own art practice, and I think you could speak to, is when you are working on a project or an exhibit like this, oftentimes when we start queering things, there's just a multiplication of ideas or possibilities or directions you can go. And so I'm wondering, when you play with the binary in different projects or in shows, do you find that you work from a multiplicity down and narrow it down, or do you find that the more you create for the show, the more directions it takes you in? Because you cover so many different art making styles that, yeah, I'm really curious.
That's such an awesome way to put it too. I think probably the latter. Like I really feel like I start somewhere and then all of a sudden I'm over here and then here and then here and then here and then I'm everywhere, right? I often have a hard time bringing it home. But yeah, like it's once you kind of open your mind to I've mentioned this a couple times today, so it feels like a theme. Like everything is material, everything can be used in a creative way, and I think so much of that as like exactly kind of how you put it, like queering things, queering materials. It's just it's a free for all. It's a complete free for all. But yeah, like it literally opens the world up. And one of the topics in the writing touches on super briefly this idea of queer world making. Hazel Meyer was an artist that talked about that in her work. This idea, it was this dive into a leather, hold on, let me get this right. A leather museum in Toronto, I think. It was a really, really interesting essay, and I think there might be a video about it, about Hazel talking about it. Anyways, all that to say that when the world isn't built for you as a queer person, it's your job to build your world for you, yourself. Yeah. And so that's sort of where this, queer world building literally kind of comes into my work, but then, the work of a lot of other queer two-spirit artists and thinkers and makers. Yeah. Thank you.
Good evening. My question is in regards to the Sky Vest. You spoke a lot about the exterior of it. I was just wondering if there's any significance to the tartan as the liner.
Thank you. Yes, there is. Okay. So this is also has to do with queer stuff too, because to me it was also these a tartan or like a crisscross pattern is a place where two things meet and they intersect and they join and they carry on in different directions sometimes. So that's very specifically one reason. But you'll notice that like when you think of a tartan or a pattern, you would think of it as a grid traditionally. And I very, very consciously wanted to skew that grid so that it wasn't just a square meets square. It was, again, even its orientation was twisted again. So the other sort of interesting piece of, I guess, my own family's history, but a lot of Métis history is our blend with Scottish heritage. Although the tartan that's in there is not anything to do with a family tartan I have. I just had this tartan. I thought it was really nice and fit with the other themes. But yeah, this idea of clanship, of belonging to certain family systems is something from Scottish heritage that Indigenous heritage is also kind of connected with together, if that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great question.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the vest as well. It has to do with the single red bead on the back.
For sure. So that's in a beading tradition, it's called a spirit bead. So we're taught to incorporate a conscious mistake into each of our pieces. And this is how I was taught, is that this is a gesture of humility. That's the way I kind of still think about it. The way a lot of other people are taught is that as makers, as beaders, we make things out of nothing. It comes together and it becomes something. And this is akin to a creator if you're spiritual. And so this spirituality in connection to an art-making practice, that gesture is your gesture of humanness almost. It's saying, I might be good at beading, but I'm not creator good. So the way I approach it is very much about, being just humble. I mean, I still try different weird things every day, and I undo a lot of the beading that I do. I don't know if people quite realize that a lot of it is about undoing and making it better the next time. So that's a great question. Thank you.
I had a question about the piece that has a very long name that I immediately forgot, but it's the knot piece.
Yes.
Everything else, I can see the interaction between the pieces, but that one seems to be really focused on opposition, and I was wondering either what I'm missing or what the talk is behind that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Honestly, I forget the title of the work too. It goes, the
harder I work.
The harder I work,
I can't remember the second part, but the third part is the more I become the work,
Yeah.
the closed line.
Yeah. The harder I work, the more I become the work. No. Oh God. Yeah. So it's on the label. You can check that. No, but it's like it's intentionally confusing, and part of it is this like inner struggle I have regularly about identity, and so that's part of it. So the two materials, they're super oppositional. They're both from a backyard. The blue blobby shape is a clothesline, so that's where the closed line comes in. The clothesline is its function just like entirely removed. I knotted it from end to end until it was totally unfunctional. That root that's next to it is a willow root from my backyard, a tree that I had cut down when I wanted to build a fence. And I talk a lot about that in a guilty way. And I say that every time because I don't normally like to kill trees. I like trees. So I felt so bad that I kept these roots and just didn't know what I was going to do with them. But this same kind of like struggle from the first piece, the clothesline, just knotting and knotting and knotting and getting into like a repetitive kind of internal overthinking was repeated once on the route, but with so much more ease and slowness. So I had it soaking in my bathtub for about a week and just was kind of really slowly working it into more of that shape. So it started out so close to what that looks like, and I just sort of helped it further into that shape. But they are the two sort of modes, the two struggles, the comfort and the discomfort. And honestly, I feel like I like to work myself so hard because I just honestly don't feel worthy of a lot of the exposure I have, a lot of the getting to exhibit in a gallery. That's unbelievable. Like, I really just don't even feel worthy sometimes. So that struggle is about overworking to a point that you've just made yourself into a knot. It's just, you lost your function. So that's that.
I've also heard you explain it, which I thought was really lovely, is that it's like these two materials that are kind of dissonant, but yet they share a similar form, and that you saw that it's sort of a good metaphor for your sense of identity.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And you are so worthy.
Oh, God.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'd like to thank Catherine for tonight for sharing her insights on her work, and congratulations on the exhibition. It's a real thrill to have the work here and have it in dialogue with the Wakshupi show and with Ross's show as well. And so congratulations to you on the exhibit, and to Ross. Congratulations to Ross. Please pass that on. I want to thank our staff for all the hard work that they've done in getting the exhibition installed, and all the preparations for the reception tonight. So that includes Rob Boss, our preparator extraordinaire, Jennifer Ross, our acting operations manager, Vincent Hotelling, our administrative assistant, Christy Schweiger, our education coordinator, and Catherine Ernst, our social media coordinator. I also want to thank Dave Peltier, our board chair, and Pat Aldred, our vice chair, and Wendy Parsons. They helped out with prepping today for the reception and with some of the programming. Catherine actually did a tour with 49 kids this afternoon. Thanks again to RBC Foundation for sponsoring the programming with our fall exhibitions, and to the New Southern Plains Métis Local 160 for also partnering on the programming. Thanks to you all for coming tonight, and I encourage you to go and spend some more time in the exhibitions and have some food and refreshments and conversation. Thanks so much.